As world leaders gather at the International Monetary Fund in Washington this April, they need to address the problem of speculative capital flows to developing countries. At the communique for the BRICS Summit, a summit between Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa a few weeks ago, they criticized industrialized nations for creating an environment in the global economy whereby speculative capital flows are moving to emerging market and developing countries and creating havoc in their countries' economies. Many of these countries are taking matters into their own hands and trying to regulate this capital, but they are struggling to do so. A new task force report centered here at Boston University says that those concerns are very justified and urges the International Monetary Fund and the G20 to take action. The environment that the developing countries are talking about has been confirmed by new studies by the International Monetary Fund. When you have low interest rates and relatively low growth in the rich countries and relatively higher interest rates and faster growth in developing countries, global investors borrow money from the industrialized countries and speculate on developing country currencies, stocks, and bonds, and so forth. This is causing asset bubbles and currency appreciation. It's making it harder for exporters to export their goods in the world economy, causing layoffs, inflation, and a whole number of problems in the developing world. Many developing countries are taking matters into their own hands. They're regulating cross-border capital flows with either price-based mechanisms like taxes or by quantitative restrictions. Countries like Brazil, South Africa, South Korea, Taiwan, and others are on this list. The Articles of Agreement of the International Monetary Fund enable countries to do that. Moreover, they allow countries to cooperate north and south. For instance, a country like Brazil could have a tax on stocks coming into the country, but also the United States could have a tax on investors in the United States speculating on stock markets outside of their country. Developing countries are struggling with these regulations because the full use of this policy space that countries have isn't being used. Rich countries are not regulating on the other end of these capital flows, and a number of trade and investment treaties are actually making it harder for both developing countries and developed countries to regulate capital flows and to cooperate on doing it. So as the International Monetary Fund and G20 leaders meet in April in Washington, they should enable developing countries to regulate cross-border capital flows. They should encourage industrialized countries to cooperate with these regulations, and they should address the asymmetries and inconsistencies in international law so that all countries have all the tools they need to prevent the next financial crisis. If you want to read more of the task force report and learn more about these issues, you can go to the Pardee Center for the Study of the Long-Range Future here at Boston University and look at the new task force report called Regulating Global Capital Flows for Long-Run Development.